Okay, so next I will like to invite Mr. Advait Kurlekar, who is one of the speakers for today. He has over 28 years of experience in industry, management consulting and coaching, having worked in leading organizations like Tata Motors, AF Ferguson, and PwC prior to starting Upohan Management Consultants in 2009. Advait has expertise in the areas of business strategy, balance scorecard, and HR consulting, and has led consulting projects across a range of sectors like BFSI, engineering, automotive, retail, pharma, FMCG, and advertising. Advait is a visiting faculty at SP Jain Global Center of Management and is also a charter member of TIE Pune's chapter. He is a certified independent director and he's also on the board of various B schools and startup incubators like BAHU and SPPU Research Park Foundations. Over to you, Mr. Advait. You can take it forward.
Thank you so much, and thanks, CREDAI, thanks, Abhishek, and the entire team for giving us this opportunity not only to work with you as knowledge partners in curating this event, but also give us an opportunity to share our views on a very important topic of performance management. So, let me start right away. What I want to talk about maybe next 25-30 minutes is the entire gamut of what we normally call performance management or performance management system. And therefore, we have called this presentation Understanding Performance because there are a couple of aspects in terms of what understanding performance means. So first and foremost, it goes with measuring performance. So when we are looking at a performance management system, first and foremost, we need to have some kind of framework where we are able to measure our employees' performance, our company's performance to start with, and ensure that there is alignment between company performance and employee performance. So that's the first thing that has to be very clear. And then when we are looking at performance management and measuring performance, it can be measured on what is normally called quantitative as well as qualitative parameters. So what are quantitative parameters and what could be qualitative parameters? So in other words, we also call them objective or subjective parameters. Objective are essentially measurable, quantifiable, can be put into some kind of number, score, index, percentage, so on and so forth, and we'll talk about it a little later. There are subjective parameters, and I guess most of the organizations, especially in the small, medium-sized kind of businesses, the performance appraisals normally happen. We've seen that even in large companies. The performance appraisal happens in a very subjective, qualitative, or perception-based kind of methodology. What does perception-based mean? That means if I'm evaluating somebody else, it's my opinion, my feeling, my gut feel. I think this person is doing well. In my opinion, that person is not doing well. That is all subjective or qualitative evaluation. And as a consulting company, when we do work with clients, we try and move them from the right hand side of the screen that you're seeing to the left hand side of the screen, which means more from subjective to objective, more from opinion, perception, thinking, my view kind of based to something which is more tangible, something that is quantifiable, something that is measurable, where something is not dependent on somebody's opinion or like we always joke that my performance appraisal should not, for example, depend on the mood of my boss that day. If she is not in a good mood, if my performance appraisal is not happening at 9:30 in the morning, but it is happening at 6 o'clock in the evening, if my boss has got out of bed on the wrong side of the bed, as they say, there is some challenge that day, something has happened in the business at a personal level or at my level. These things should not matter for evaluation and appraisal of me as an individual, as an employee, where last 365 days, or typically it happens in a financial year in Indian context, April to March. It should not happen that those 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and the environment just before those 45 minutes cloud the entire performance of me and my performance journey for the last 1 year. And therefore, if it is measurable, if it is quantified, if there is a numeric score around it, then the discussion doesn't start in terms of how we below what was your performance, but to okay, this seems to be coming out from measurable, quantifiable parameters. Now let's discuss why this is good or this is bad or this is ugly. And that is a very key aspect in terms of performance management or professionalizing your HR. formalizing your HR policies as far as performance management is concerned. The third thing, obviously, therefore, that if we have to look into objective, measurable, quantifiable kind of performance or evaluation parameters, they are normally colloquially called what is called KPIs, key performance indicators. Very simple, key performance indicators. So first and foremost, these are indicators. That means these are metrics. That means these are measurable. That means these are quantifiable. That means these are objective. What are we measuring? We are measuring performance. Whose performance? The concerned employee's performance. Key. Key means what? Key means most important. All of us, at an operational level, people locally say, we are doing thousands of things. But that does not mean that when it comes to my own individual performance, although I'm doing thousands of things, it does not mean that I should get evaluated, or at least my expectation should be that I will get evaluated on all those thousand things. Which means we have to say that of all the colloquially thousand things that I'm doing, which are those top three, four, at best ideally five key indicators around which I believe my performance should get evaluated. When I say I is not a person, me as a role holder. So the KPIs are applicable to the role holder. So like we'll see a little later, all of us would have site engineers or site supervisors. That's a role. Depending on how large or small we are, we might have 20 site engineers or 40 site engineers or just 3 site engineers. But site engineer is a site engineer, and therefore the role or the measurable parameters, quantifiable parameters for somebody like a site engineer or somebody like a stores in charge would be same. I might have 5 store in charges, I might have 1 store in charge. But the KPIs would be same. Targets can be different as we come to see it later. So that's the KPIs part. When it comes to subjective or qualitative parameters, like I say, perception based, yes, they are also important, but that should not be the only way around which evaluation happens. And that's why I said that we are trying to move most of our clients from the right hand side of evaluation to the left hand side of the evaluation on the slide that you see. Having said that, we cannot not do without subjective or perception based parameters. And these are normally what is called behavioral indicators or behavioral attributes. And we'll see some examples of that a little later. So when it comes to quantitative evaluation, this is a typical format of a KPI or very colloquially called goal setting sheet or goal setting form or goal setting format or goal setting template that we recommend normally. So obviously the first part, what you see, the first three, four lines are the operational things in terms of what is the name of the person, what is the designation of the person, which function, when was this evaluation done, is it for which period, is it FY 21, 22, 22, 23, is it for the month, is it for the quarter, is it for the first half, second half, and who, what kind of department that, who's the head of the department, which means the reporting principal. And then in the middle portion, you see that we have given space in our template for only 5 KPIs. Each of these KPIs would have some weightage. For each of these weightage, there will be a target. The fact that there is a KPI with a target, which means all the things that I've said so far, which means it is quantifiable, which means it is objective, which means it is measurable, which means there is a number attached to it. That number can be a number, that number can be an index, that number can be a percentage, that number can be a date, that number can be an amount, depending on what the KPI is. And then against each of that KPI, which has a weightage, which has a target, you start measuring actuals against that target. Actuals can be year on year, actuals can be month on month, actual can be week on week. In some cases, actuals can be for that day as well, depending on how frequently you want to measure these parameters. Most of it, at least since we are talking of performance management and we're talking about from an HR perspective, most of it would be done quarterly, sometimes it is done monthly. And then, of course, there is an achievement score and there's a score. And the fourth part, which is again into blue, is very, very important. And why it is important? Because we want people to actually get a physical sign off on these KPIs. So all the things that you see in blue here, in that on the screen, we want the respective job holder, the line manager, the departmental head, and co-signed by somebody from HR, countersigned by HR on this sheet. Why is it important? What does it mean? That means a job holder, if I'm signing this and these are my KPIs, then I'm signing this to be accepted post agreement on target. Which means what? I'm signing this a priori. I'm signing this in anticipation of what is the expectations from my boss from me, what are the evaluation parameters, how important each of those are, and what are the targets. So I've signed up on those. What does that mean? It means that I don't get any excuse or chance to say, कि मालूम नहीं है KPI कहाँ से आ गया, who did these KPIs, I'm not even aware, how can my evaluation be on these? No, you're not giving any chance like that. And then, depending on, let's take a simple example of suppose this is a quarterly kind of evaluation or quarterly kind of review. At the end of the quarter, you say this was the target for each of these KPIs for that quarter. This is the actual, and therefore this is the score. And I'll take you through an example to make it clear. And at the end of that actual calculation, again the same four people sign off. So there's a very clear thing that I've accepted these are the KPIs, I've accepted these are the weightages, I've accepted this is a target, and therefore now post the quarter, post the month, post the half year, post the year, depending on how frequently you want to do it, I'm saying this is my actual score. And that score comes out essentially in terms of a number, in this case a percentage. So let's quickly take an example. I'm going to take you two examples which would be most relevant for the people we have here. Let's take a simple example of a site engineer. So, like I said, the first part is the housekeeping part of it. What is the name of the gentleman that we are talking of, or the lady we are talking of? Of course, the role and designation is site engineer. Typically, a site engineer will report to the project manager. You can have different names, but the role becomes same, and the function is say site execution. Then let's have this is an illustrative example, from the work we've done in this sector. So let's take this. These are the five example or sample KPIs for the site engineer. First and foremost, it is timely completion of whatever project milestones that site engineer is working, whichever project that person is. Yeah, all of us understand that timely completion is a very important kind of role or important expectation as far as site execution or project is. Second, obviously, whatever you need to finish on time, you also need to manage that within a given defined pre-agreed budget. So if I have to put up, for this month, if I have to put a slab or if I have to do so many square meters of shuttering or I have to do some walling or what it is, or I have to do some finishing work or some plastering work, there will be some defined budget which has been approved by the management, which has been sanctioned, and I need to finish that within that time. So I have a time element, I have a cost element. While pursuing timely completion within cost, I can't cut corners, and therefore quality work is also important. And therefore, say timely closure of quality audit NC. Most of you would have some kind of quality function. They will go around, they will give an okay, without which the execution team will not proceed ahead. And if there is a challenge which the quality team identifies in their audit or in their review or in their report, they will come up with what is called NCs, non-conformances. And it is the duty of the site execution of the project team to close these NCs in a timely manner. Then, of course, safety, of course, is very, very important. So I can't sort of, take shortcuts there. And therefore, I cannot have any accidents, definitely not fatalities, ideally not even near miss kind of incidents as far as my site is concerned or my role or my area of activity as a site engineer. And then, part of the cost part is obviously that, both quality and cost, which is material wastage. There will be wastage. In your industry, it is assumed that there will be some wastage. It can be budgeted as well. And therefore, the material wastage should be within the defined limit. So let's assume that these are the five most important KPIs, quantifiable, measurable, objective KPIs for a role like a site engineer. Now let's assume I've given an example that this is the related weightage of each of these KPIs. So time is obviously most important, followed by the spend and the quality, and then the safety and the wastage comes in as 10% kind of thing. So obviously, as you can see, all that adds up to 100%. Then, of course, we are looking at what are the targets, and I've just taken some random targets. So it is timely completion. Obviously, the target has to be 100% of the project plan. So today is already close to March end. So whatever was the plan for this month by 31st March, I'm supposed to complete all of that in terms of the project milestone. Maybe for this month, whatever construction activity I'm doing as a site engineer, the budgeted cost for it is say 10 crore rupees. Timely closure, anything that came up in the last quality audit, I have to sort of close all those outstanding points before 31st March. So that's again a target for me. Near miss accidents or accidents, obviously, I don't want anything. So my target is that I have to do it in a safe kind of thing without causing any near miss accidents or fatalities. So my fatalities. So my target obviously is zero. And let's assume that the wastage for whatever work I'm doing or plan for this month, the budgeted wastage is say 0.5%. Let's assume that these are my targets. Come 1st of April, come first week of April. But before that, I sign off this that this is my target. So again, like I said, there are no excuses that where did these KPIs come from, who got these weightages, and who came out with these targets. I have clearly understood this, and therefore I am signing off. Say come 1st April, come first week of April, let's assume that these are the actuals that happen. But I have completed only 97% of what was the project milestone. But instead of 10 crore, I've managed that in 9.5 crore. Yes, I have closed all the quality audits from last time. There have been no accidents. But the wastage instead of zero point 0.5 as a target, my actual seems to be zero point 0.6. Again, this is a hypothetical example just to sort of. And therefore, my achievement is actually as compared to the target. So my target was 100, so my actual is 97, so achievement is 97. Spend, my target is 10. I actually done it in 9.5. So I've overachieved. It's a cost. Therefore, it is not actually company's target, it's target. If I have spent less money than that was anticipated, clearly it means that I have overachieved, and therefore my performance on that is 105%. The other two are clear, 100%, 100%. And instead of zero point 0.5, I have actually overshot it. But this is a wastage, so therefore I have underperformed. I have exceeded my wastage limit, so my performance there is 83% and not overachieving, it's actually underachieving. Now, this achievement gets weighted by the weightages that we have given, and therefore there is a final score that comes in terms of 39, 21, 20, 10, and 8, adding up to 98%. And then again, I sign up, my boss signs, my department HOD signs, HR counter signs, and this is my performance sheet for that month, for that quarter, for that year, depending on the frequency. So this is how suddenly, the objective parameters come in play. So instead of the project manager saying that, yeah, I think Advait as a site engineer is doing okay, but he's not doing okay on this. In my opinion, he's doing fair. There is no opinion, there is no thinking, there is no I think, I feel, in my opinion. Clearly, in this case, the score is 98 or 100. So the discussion does not start, like I said, in terms of what has been the performance. That is there for us to see. It is quantified, it is measurable. Discussion can be that, okay, is 95, 98 good? And where did we underperform? Where did we overperform? How much of that is controllable? How much of that is non-controllable? So on and so forth. So suddenly, our discussion starts on a very different level. I'll again take another example of a stores in charge. Maybe I'll just put everything together and explain to you what these are. So again, 5 KPIs for stores in charge, for example, very clearly system stock versus physical stock, wastage of account of storage and material handling, adherence to FIFO, first in, first out, and timely and accurate submission of say of stores MIS that the store in charge has to submit to the management of the project manager, that kind of thing. And again, we have taken some hypothetical weightages, we've taken some hypothetical targets, and here's a score of 102, which means in this case, the stores in charge has actually overall across all the 4 parameters that have been assigned to this person, he has overachieved on this account. So again, this is where the discussion starts that wow, we have overachieved for this month, for this quarter, for this year, whatever it is, and that's how it works. So that is what it is in terms of measuring performance to start. Then of course this is the objective parameter, and like I said, subjectivity has to be reduced, but it cannot be zero. And therefore, qualitative parameters are also important. They may not be equally important, but they are important, and therefore we need to take cognizance in terms of what could be these evaluation parameters, normally called behavioral attributes or behavioral parameters. Most of these, as you can see on the screen, are very closely related to what is normally called the core values of your organization, the kind of culture you want in your organization. In terms of standard things that you can see, ethics, integrity, trust, honesty, customer excellence, so on and so forth. So if these are the values or this is the culture that you want in your organization, then obviously you want to in a way, subjectively, qualitatively evaluate people around these. And you can then look into, okay, what does trust mean? And is there any kind of anecdote I can say in terms of that this person that I'm evaluating is very trustworthy, or he's living by the value of trust, or living by the behavioral parameter of trust, or behavioral parameter of quality, or behavioral parameter of respect, depending on which are the three or four kind of parameters you choose. Again, KPIs. So you can't have all 10 or 12 that you see on the screen. It will be top three or four or five that are you believe are most important, which sort of relate well into your culture, your values of your organization, and you want to well evaluate your people. And then you can say that you can have a 80-20 kind of mix between objective and subjective parameters, where the quantitative parameters say 80% and the qualitative parameters are 20. In some cases, it changes depending on the seniority, so on and so forth. But like I said, qualitative as well as quantitative, both way is how you measure your performance. Then, of course, it is once you measure your performance, what is important is, are you managing your performance very well? Which means uh, we have to understand that when we are talking of performance management, it goes beyond performance appraisal. Appraisal is just typically in every organization, you all understand appraisals, and appraisals typically is a once a year kind of program, once a year kind of process. Typically happens now in March, and my appraisal happens, and I keep my fingers crossed. And one fine day, a letter in an envelope comes to me from HR. I open the letter, I feel elated, or I am okay, or I feel disappointed because I have a different view of how have I done, and looks like the management has a different view in terms of how I have done, and that might lead to disappointment kind of thing. But when we are looking at performance management, then it goes far beyond just that once in a year kind of process. Yes, appraisals are important, but also when we are looking at performance management, there are three stages, which means there has to be a continuity in what we are trying to do. So there are several things that you need to do as far as what we are calling pre-appraisal kind of discussion. And the last few slides that we talked about in terms of KPI and target setting, quantitatively as well as qualitatively, that is very, very important as far as pre-appraisal is concerned. Then, of course, there is a during appraisal kind of thing where many companies start with what we call a self-assessment. So basically, I write down what all I have done. There is quantitative parameters as well as qualitative parameters, and then hopefully there is a face-to-face appraisal discussion with my line manager, with my immediate boss. Now you can always change this word appraisal to a review. So if you don't want to, because normally appraisal word and what we'll talk about a little later in terms of the increment and promotion, they are normally very well entwined in everybody's heads. So instead of appraisal, you can call it review. And if you can do a review every month, every quarter, without affecting anybody's salary at every quarter, at every month. But there has to be some kind of appraisal discussion, and different companies now have started calling it, performance dialogues on a continuous basis that happens. Post that appraisal, we obviously need to have, ratings come, and there has to be some moderation of ratings. There are people who are lenient, there are other people who are strict, and therefore there has to be some moderation, typically role played by HR. And then, of course, based on the appraisal, you could have a performance-linked increment, performance-linked incentive, depending on how you are. And very important part is, the training area identification then, of course, happens based on the appraisals, or is supposed to happen based on these things. So in an appraisal, I would get told by my boss that, yeah, you need to work on these two or three parameters. There could be some technical training, there could be some behavioral training. These inputs go to HR consolidates everything, supposed to consolidate everything and build what is called a training plan.
Sorry to interrupt, Advait. I think there is some
Yeah.
issue with the voice. I'm just getting notifications at chat that they are unable to hear. So if you could just be a little louder, maybe,
Okay.
or just
Yeah. Yeah.
adjust. Yeah, yeah. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Is it better now? Is it better now?
Yes, it is better now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay. And then, of course, it comes to, you've measured your performance, you've set these goals, you've set these targets on objective and subjective parameters. You're not looking at it as a once a year kind of process. So there is a managing performance kind of cycle that you have gone into. Now, of course, the last thing which any employee would expect is the rewarding of the performance. So that rewarding comes both in terms of monetary which all of us understand. That means how much more money I'm going to get, either as a permanent increase in my salary, which is increment, or it could be in terms of incentive kind of thing, which means it could be in terms of a bonus, it could be in terms of a variable pay, it could be in terms of performance based pay. So once 1 month I could get good variable pay, the other month I may or may not get depending on my performance. What people don't understand, but are very important from a company's perspective, is what we call non-monetary rewards, which means that people, these are rewards that employees get, which are non-monetary from an employee perspective. So, for example, if I get sent to a very high-profile training program, say outside India, I don't get any money in my pocket as an employee, but obviously the company is spending lots of money on my on this reward. Or I might get sent with my family for a 2 night 3 day stay or a 4 night 5 day stay in Southeast Asia with a budget of so and so. I don't get any money in my hand. Company is spending money, so it's not monetary for me, monetary definitely for the company, but it's a reward based on my performance. So those also need to get considered when we're looking at performance management. And like I mentioned earlier, the training need identification, the training and development part of it is also an integral part of performance management, which goes beyond performance appraisal. And last but not the least, may be relevant for some of you, maybe may not be relevant for many of you. It is what is called career planning and a succession planning. For young people in your organization, they would expect you to tell them that, okay, if I stick around for 10, 15, 20 years, or even 5 or 7, 8, 10 years, where can I find myself in the organization? How will my career path move ahead, higher and higher? What kind of different roles you have for me in this organization? And for people who have been with you for long, who are near retirement, kind of thing, or some people, of course, leave, can we also look into some kind of succession planning? I'm not talking of succession planning at the owner's level. That naturally will happen. I'm talking of succession planning for employees, for your key employees, for your key talent, especially for people whom you know in the next 1 or 2, 3 or 4 years are going to retire, or suddenly there is a voluntary kind of exit at a senior level, and therefore you need to be prepared. You cannot be caught off guard. So that all these aspects, monetary, non-monetary, T&D, training and development, as well as career planning and succession planning, are an integral part over and above performance appraisal. And that's what it makes a performance management system rather than a performance appraisal system. So that's the first part. Then when we talk of, finally, at the end of the day, when it comes to an appraisal, everybody's going to say, fine, you've told me what my KPIs are, I've delivered, you've also managed my performance, great. Now, what's in it for me? How does it matter to me? And therefore, most of us would look at some kind of increment, which of course we all know is a fixed increase in our manpower cost, fixed increase in our salary. But let us also understand that increments depends on variety of factors. So first and foremost, as you might agree, that the company, your business has to have the ability to pay. Now, last 2 years have been challenging for many of us. Especially first lockdown, couple of months, couple of weeks, all of us had to shut down our business. Everybody was caught off guard, and therefore, many of you may not have had the ability to pay because we were not making enough money, or some of us were not making money at all, and therefore that becomes, in our view, a qualifying criteria. Then, of course, there are some factors that are external to your organization, like the competitive landscape or like the inflation. Petrol being what it is, fuel prices being what it is, cost of living being what it is. So these are the three criteria or two criteria which will be relevant for everybody in your organization. And then there are three more criteria which you should consider, which are individual specific, your employee specific. If your employee is giving you consistent performance or consistent above average performance, then obviously you would want that person to get a different kind of treatment as far as compensation is concerned. If you believe as management or as HR heads that this employee has long-term potential in your organization, performance is decent, but also the potential that you see is also good. You might want to look at that person's compensation differently. And of course, that's where the behavioral parameters come in, which we talked about a little earlier. If the person is doing well on your assessment of those behavioral parameters, could be integrity, could be trust, could be quality, could be customer experience, what have you, then of course you would look into that individual's compensation separately. what I want to portray from this slide is that we've seen large number of organizations saying that we've had a good year, suppose the stuff increment. That cannot be one size fits all kind of thing. Yeah, because that support the structure works only on the first three things that you're saying. Ability to pay, yes, we've done well. Competitive landscape and inflation matters to everybody. But support the structure then defeats the last three circles that you see, which is my individual performance and its consistency, my assessment of management's assessment of me as a long-term potential, and how am I doing on behavioral parameters. So generally avoid this one size fits all kind of thing in terms of rewarding performance. Then, of course, there are different aspects depending on how, what rules you're looking at in terms of compensation and rewarding performance based on, based rewarding additional compensation based on performance. For seniors, the overall company performance also matters. If I'm an HOD, then I can't say that, look, I've done my job and I really don't care whether the company is doing well or not. I need to get rewarded. It cannot be that way. If I'm an HOD, then I am responsible for my department's performance as well, and therefore that also could have a weightage. And then, of course, my individual based on this KPIs and based on these behavioral parameters that we talked about. So, depending on the seniority, each of these ABC could have their individual weightages. So, for example, we talked about a site engineer as an example or a stores in charge as an example. Maybe the weightage for A is 0, maybe the weightage for B is 10, and maybe the weightage for C is 90. I'm just taking an example. And therefore, the individual performances KPI would have 90% weightage, and maybe the departmental score, how entire project team or site execution team is doing, might have a 10% weightage. I'm just taking as an example. And based on this composite score, you may want to have non-monetary and monetary kind of performance linked payment, depending on what we discussed, the training and development, any awards, any reward and recognition, so on and so forth. So depending on your seniority, it is not just about individual performance. You have to tell your HODs, tell your senior people that the departmental performance as well as the overall company performance also matter, especially for seniors in your team. So that's what this is all about. So this is what I wanted to share as far as performance management is concerned. We have a couple of more minutes. Happy to take any questions if you already have. No questions? That's very frightening.
I think Nisar's network has dropped. We had a set of questions. Just give me 2 minutes. I'll just arrange.
Sure, sure, sure.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, thanks so much for that wonderful and insightful session. Surely that lot of takeaways from that beautiful journey. So there are a couple of questions that to keep this session more interactive, we'd like to ask you, and people will like to understand a little bit more about that. So starting with the first one, what are the different parameter performance indicators for different staff levels across the organizations? If you can give us a little bit about that.
Okay, so let me take the example that I had given in the presentation. So we talk of the lowest levels typically, which is a site engineer. Now the entire team of projects or site execution or whichever nomenclature you want to use will have similar kind of KPIs, because whether I am in charge of the entire operations of a real estate company, I cannot say that time, cost, quality, safety, and any kind of documentation kind of thing that is required. At least these four, I cannot say that even if I'm VP operations or whatever the designation be, these are important. So different roles in an organization will have different KPIs depending on the function they represent. Obviously, somebody in account, somebody in purchase, somebody in IT, somebody in HR will have different KPIs, and somebody in site execution is what you saw. But even within the function, since many are HR people here, head of HR will have a different KPIs than say what somebody who's doing the talent acquisition or recruitment is concerned. So it depends on the role. So, like I said, we all do, depending on the role that we are hired for, my current designation, we do thousands of things, and we have to pick those top 3, 4, or 5 most important that are measurable, that are quantifiable as my KPIs, as my objective KPIs.
Got it. Got it. The second question will be, why is it so, keeping scores or performance indicators so important? And secondly, I think while they are important, it's also so hard at the same time, to maintain them. Can you shed a little bit light over there?
Yeah. So this is a myth that we have that it's very difficult to measure performance. And especially I know I'm going to make a bold statement here with many HR people here, but especially HR people feel that whatever we do is so unique and so jara hatke that it can't be measured. We just have to force ourselves, have that discipline and rigor to try and quantify otherwise subjective or otherwise unquantifiable parameters. Admittedly, like a site engineer or like somebody in sales where the targets are very clear, it will not be as easy for an HR person or a finance person or IT person or any support function, somebody in billing, somebody in contracts, to get as much quantifiability as possible. But at least it's a good starting point when starting with zero. Like I said, when I'm sitting, suppose I'm in contracts and I'm sitting with my boss, head of contracts, and then the discussion is asking, "बोल भाई क्या किया last month?" Instead of that, at least I have some parameters around which the discussion can start. And
Hmm.
then when it comes to a very important point, and we take it lightly, but it actually happens in real world that my boss's opinion about me cannot be the only parameter for my performance appraisal. If he doesn't like me, if he doesn't like the shirt I'm wearing today, as an example, it cannot be that okay, my performance appraisal खराब हो. Plus, basic human tendency. I might have done exceedingly well for till last week, and something I admit also that something really bad happened thanks to me last week. Yeah, and but that should not cloud my boss's view in terms of all the things, good things I've done in the last 11 months. It just gets watered down, or it could be the ulta that I've been a very average performance for last 11 and a half months, but I've done some fantastic thing yesterday, and thankfully today is my appraisal. Suddenly, that should not totally kind of take the appraisal to a different level because the boss remembers only what happened yesterday.
So
Therefore,
if there are standardized pointers regarding those, then
absolutely,
that can much
absolutely.
help the processes in a much better way.
Correct. I'll give another example. Normally, these appraisal systems happen in April and May.
Hmm.
And in my example, if something good or bad happened last week, that is in the next financial year, an appraisal for last period. That gets forgotten.
Correct.
April
Correct.
April 21 to March 31st 22, this guy has done well. But on 10th of April, something bad has happened, and my appraisal is on 15th of April. That's why those parameters are important. And
Got
as I
it.
said, at least as a good starting point to start the discussion, start the performance dialogue, it's a good starting point.
Okay. Got it. Also, can you tell us a little bit about what systems and software can be used for performance management in the company? Or
Yeah, so
is there a way to sort of is there a way to sort of automate that performance management and inside the organization? Give
sure,
us a
sure,
little bit
sure. I
idea
mean,
about that.
it's a good question because as you grow in size and scale, you will need an automated system rather than just Excel and PowerPoint. There are several softwares available that are standalone softwares. We call them HRMS and HRIS. If you're a large company, if you have some kind of ERP, then most of these ERPs will have some kind of module. The large ERPs of SAPs and Oracles definitely have that kind of module. But my good friend Manasi is here, and she's going to take the next session. So I'm sure she will apprise all of us in terms of the different technologies available, or not just appraisals, for different aspects, the entire life cycle of an. So whoever asks the question,
Got
please request the person to wait for another 45 minutes, and you'll get all the answers from us.
Okay. And with your experience, we also want to know what is the best way to sort of incentivize employees to stay in your organization other than the monetary compensation, because there can be a lot of hacks and gimmicks that can be played upon to bring their interest more towards the organization. Can you help us a little bit around that from the practical
Sure, sure.
experiences that you
So,
might
so
have had?
like I said, the incentive can be both monetary and non-monetary. You have asked a question on non-monetary. I'll talk about that first, but I also want to spend some time on the monetary part of incentive. Let us understand the meaning of the word incentive. It is some reward that you're providing to the employee, which ideally should actually incentivize somebody. If my salary is 100 rupees and after achieving all my targets, I get 2 rupees as incentive. Then I will say, forget it, यार इतना मगजमारी क्यों करने का, छोड़ दो. Or like I said, सबको 10 टक्का दे दो. Then you are, dissuading performers. The whole objective of performance management system is to differentiate and distinguish between performers and non-performers. If you don't want that to happen, then you don't go ahead with the performance management system. Non-monetary, like I said, could be a holiday, could be a club membership, could be a subscription to some kind of magazine, could be some kind of ticket, tickets for some kind of event. So these are monetary from the company's perspective. But as an employee, I don't get anything additional income in my bank or in my pocket. Therefore, they are called non-monetary. Or I get sent for some training program, to some business school or whatever. I get to send for 3 days I am Ahmedabad program. I don't get any money. My travel stay gets covered by the company, fees get paid by the company. But I learn. That's a reward fund. But it's non-monetary. A lot
Got
of
it.
companies send their executives for some 7-day ISB program in Hyderabad. Those kind of these are examples of non-monetary.
Got it. And finally, a last question, how often do you think we should be reviewing the performance management system in the organization? What could be the frequency of it?
So when it comes to appraisals and therefore its linkage to increment, obviously the answer would be once a year. But the appraisal is not an HR. While HR is a facilitator, please don't consider it as an HR process. It's a business process. So if I'm an HOD, ideally I should do my internal business review once a month. What am I reviewing? If I review my direct reportees KPIs, in fact, I'm doing a business review for myself. If I'm head of operations and I have say 7 project managers with me and I review their performance on a monthly basis, कि क्या हो रहा है भाई आपके project में, then I know what's happening in my company and I'm good to report it to my bosses. This will propagate that the project managers in turn go to their sites and review the performance of their supervisors and site engineers and quality and safety and all those people. So ideally once a month. If you really can't do it once a month, maybe for support functions or whatever, you can do it once a quarter. But don't wait for the HR process of appraisal to kick in. This is a business review. These are KPIs, are business KPIs, and therefore you should do it ideally once a month, if not once a quarter.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much for all that information and all those insight in this category. We look forward more from you from time to time.